Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. Today we're going to be showing you how to mix, okay? So we're going to be mixing a project from Fleek, our latest project from BusyWorksBeats.com. You can click that link below and actually sign up for the free bonus files, which is this folder called the Kendrick Lamar Artificial Waves. You actually get this for free just for signing up. We're going to show you how to mix this project inside of FL Studio 12 using only FL Studio 12 plugins, and how to roughly get your song louder on the master. So let's turn off the Fruity limiter. First step, when you're mixing, turn off the limiter on your master, because that'll give you a different perception of your music and make it seem louder than, it'll make you think you're doing more work than you are, okay? So we're gonna turn that off first. Then we're going to listen to each sound and go through, mix it one by one. Then we're gonna mix it in context, because it's all about context. It doesn't matter how well you mix one thing. You can make a drum sound super punchy and super subby, but when you add an 808, okay, you're gonna have conflict because the 808 has subtones in it as well. And you wanna mix in context, okay? It's all about context. It's about making everything mesh together to create a bigger picture. So here's the folder. I'm just gonna play it without any enhancements. So I'm actually gonna reset the panning, reset the knobs. So it might be actually loud. I should probably turn the master down. But I'm gonna reset everything to show you how mixing, it's a thought process. And once you understand the thought process, you'll understand how to make those decisions for yourself and why you do things. Because a lot of people, what happens is they learn techniques in mixing and they don't know why they're doing them. And so you just learn a whole bunch of techniques thinking that you have to do it every song, and you really don't. You can see here in the mixer, if we look at the plugins, only one EQ is used across all of these instruments. And that's because in Fleek, in this particular project, we recorded audio because we want you to experience audio as well for FL Studio project templates. But anyway, in this project, it was strictly audio and a little drum MIDI. So the point here is that we recorded from high-end hardware. So we're talking about the Prophet 08 from Dave Smith Instruments. We're talking about the Virus Access TI, okay, or the Access Virus TI hardware. We're talking about what else? Electric guitars. Okay, so real instruments recorded for you. And when you have those high quality sounds, look, there's no, plugins needed. It was just a matter of panning things and making things louder. But I'm going to show you how to do things, a little bit more complex to get your feet wet in mixing and the whole thought process behind mixing. Okay, so now we're going to preview this project file without any mixing. So let's open the mixer. I'm going to turn the volume down for the master just because I don't want it to clip. And also be sure to turn off that Fruity limiter plugin, because you don't want to, have the perception that a song sounds good without it actually sounding good first. So I'm going to I reset all the knobs. I reset all the volume faders, and I turned down the master. And here's what it sounds like unmixed. So you can see how before it sounded punchy, it sounded edgy, and it sounded clear and concise. Now it's going to sound blurry. It's going to sound weak. Okay, this is like a before and after of a mix, even though we showed you the after first. So let's hit play, and we're going to hear how soft it sounds and not punchy. Okay. So you can see how the song sounds completely chaotic simply because the mix is not good. And a lot of producers think they're mixing to their best capability, when in reality, they may not be. They may be missing very little subtle things that make a world of difference. And you could see the world of difference from, the after to before. So let's reset the master. Actually, let's leave the master low because we don't want any clipping. First thing you want to do is go through the volumes and the panning that you hear in your mind. Okay, you want to think volume first. Just how can we make it sound more even? So the first thought process is, what is going to stand out in this beat? Do we want the kick and the snare to stand out? Do we want the bass to stand out? Do we want the synth to drive the song? In this case, we want the drums to be the driver of the song because they hold most of the groove of the song. If I solo the drums, that groove is very swingy and it needs to have attention. So we have to give that a higher perception of tension or of attention so that we can actually make it sound better. So first things we need to do are make sure our kick and our snare are our loudest sounds first. So we see our kick. Let me turn it back up to reset. So these are good levels for the kick and the snare. They don't need to be any louder. You can see on the master, we're barely going past -3. Or not even -3 actually. We're barely going past -6, okay, dB. Now, a lot of people get hung up on dB. Okay, dB is not as important because it's all relative. And we get into that in the how to mix beats easily, okay? But don't get focused on dB. Just worry about what's loudest, what's quietest. And you want to leave enough dB so they can work later on the master track. So we're under -6 dB still as a whole. So the drums are good. And when you're mixing, you want to go into your playlist and just go one by one first until you have everything, until you've attacked everything. So the first sound that actually comes in, what I like to do is work by bar. So I like to go 4 bars and then I like to keep going until I've reached every sound and mixed every sound properly. So the first 4 bars, this isn't even the first 4. Here's the first 4 bars. And we have the guitar part that comes in first. So since these all play at once, you want to mix these in context because it's a contextual type of recording. So let's right click and left click to highlight these only. And we can zoom in so we don't have to loop 4 bars, just this part. So you can see they're loud by default. So let's go to our mixer and look at the guitar parts. And we can solo each of these by right clicking at a time. So let's lower the volume. Again, we're worried about volume and balance for now. We don't want it to be too loud and we don't want it to be too quiet. So that's good enough. So let's listen to the next guitar part. Let's lower that down. Now the goal here is to kind of match the levels. So we want to look at this guitar part and look at this guitar part. Are their levels matching? Okay, because they're all blending together. So it's best to kind of match their levels, and whatever you want to stand out, you can pull that level up higher. So here's the third guitar. Again, just because the faders are in different positions doesn't mean the recording is going to have a different dB reading. And that's because we recorded audio. So audio can be louder, it can be softer. So you want to make sure you're really looking at the dB readings in this case to make sure their levels match, not the fader. So this is all 3 of them together. Now what we can do, this is more for intermediate to advanced mixers, but you got to learn this at some point anyway. So what you can do is select multiple tracks in the mixer by hitting Control Shift and left click to highlight. Okay, so we have all 3 guitars highlighted, and we can actually put this into one guitar kind of track. So you can see track 21 is empty. Let's right click and let's rename this guitar bus. So this is where all the guitars are going to stack up into one mixer track. So let's reselect those guitars by hitting Control Shift, left click and drag. And we're going to right click the up arrow down here. So right click, route to this track only. Okay. If you route to this track, it's going to create what's called an auxiliary send. It's basically going to duplicate the audio. So that's not what you want. You want to route to this track only. So now it looks like I accidentally clicked the send somewhere. Okay, because I was trying to demonstrate something. All right, so anyway, everything's going to be in this bus for the guitars. So now you can see the whole total dB. Even though each of these reads lower dB, you can see it reads lower than this dB. You're probably like, why is this louder than all these 3? Okay, it's because all these 3 combine. They have frequencies that stack. Whenever you stack frequencies of similar tone, they're going to add up in dB, and it's going to be hidden because they're across different mixer tracks. So you're like, okay, you think the guitar audio is at this dB level when in reality it's actually louder. Okay, so that's why we like to combine things into a bus so we can see visually what's going on. So we can actually lower the fader to actually match the dB we want it to achieve, which is lower. And now we can control effects for all the guitars at once. Instead of putting an EQ on each of these guitars, we can now just put one EQ on the guitar bus, for instance. So let's go to Fruity Parametric EQ2. Let's just put a gentle low pass or a gentle high pass and cut out some of the lows that aren't really present anyway. But then we're going to boost at about, let's find the frequency that makes this stick out. That sounds, I'd say 1400 Hertz is where the sound kind of picks up its energy, is where it sounds good. So we're going to boost there about 2 dB or so, just to kind of bring out that frequency, to separate it from the rest of the frequencies, because it's all about balance. So let's add a reverb to this guitar. So let's actually add a Fruity Delay first. So let's open up our plugins and go to Fruity Delay 2. We're going to put it on ping pong mode. We're going to tell it to pan left and right this amount of width. We're going to lower our volume input, and let's turn our feedback up a little bit. And we're going to set the time to 2. So we have that Hawaiian kind of oceany kind of beach sound. Okay, now we can add Fruity Reverb 2. You can either do this on an auxiliary send or you could do this directly. We'll just do it directly for this video. So in that case, we're going to just keep our dry levels all the way up, turn our width to the left, or if you want to narrow, whatever you want to do with your width, lower your wet levels. Here's a dramatic reverb. What I like to do is increase the decay time, so it's a longer reverb, increase the size, and I like to increase the high cut and the low cut. We'll get into all that later, but this is just how you manipulate that plugin. So we're giving it more of a, it's kind of like playing a guitar in one of those oceanside or poolside bathrooms that are kind of open, but they have all the paneling on the wall. So you get that weird reverb. So in that case, we're going to turn up the early reflections to give us that same sound. Turn down the decay a little bit. We're actually going to make the diffusion a little more shapely, a little more rigid. So what that does is it allows you to actually hear the echo bouncing off of each part of the wall. It makes it more like a delay than like a reverb. But anyway, reverb is echo anyway. So now the guitar is settled. Now you can see how all those combine. Now let's say you want to add a Fruity Chorus effect in between these. Now how do I move these? You left click and you hit either U or D to move up and down. Okay, and it's important which order these plugins work because it works from top to bottom. So, you know, you have to have these processes ordered correctly or else you're going to get, you know, less than likely results. So let's open up the Fruity Chorus. And we're really going to give it that California sound by lowering this a little bit on the mix level, just to where we can hear it, which is right about there. So there, now we have the California kind of beachside guitar effect. Okay, and that's how we did that. Now let's move on to the next element in the song, which is the drums. Now the kick and the snare don't really need any work because they're already programmed for you. But let's look at the kick signature. Solo. So basically you're going to give the kick a little more thump. We're going to give it a little punch at 250K just to give the iPod listeners a little more clarity. So the hi-hat is already panned, so it's panned to the left a little bit. It's actually stereo, so it's left and right. So in that case, we'll get into that. We get into that and how to mix beats easily, but stereo means left and right. Just there's a time difference between the two. But you can pan the hi-hat. It seems already panned to the left. The snare is nice and smacky, so let's open up EQ for the snare. And let's just pull out some of the high frequency. Pull that down. So we're keeping it in key. We're finding the frequency of the key of the song, pulling that in the snare. with a very narrow bandwidth and pulling it up a little bit so it sounds more in key. Then we're going to boost the low end of the snare. Okay, so a snare has a lot of low end. A lot of people don't realize that. And that's where that kind of punchiness comes from. So when you EQ, you can see the snare is a lot louder than the kick. So let's lower that fader until we get a good balance. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next element, and now we're going to unlock the bass. And you can see how mixing starts from top to bottom. It's very organized. So we're going to go one by one until we mix it off. So this one's very loud. We're going to pull that down because we want the kick and the snare to be the loudest. Now you can see the audio is very wavy, left and right, kind of going left and right. What we can do is an advanced technique called adding a limiter. So we're going to go to slot 3 for this. Go to Fruity Limiter. We're just going to give it a ceiling. A ceiling is going to act like a brick wall. Literally, it's going to make it more flat. So let's lower this ceiling until you can see the shape is kind of triangular, going up, down, up, down. What I'm going to do is lower the ceiling to about this point so it's more flat across the board. And now you can see the audio kind of peaks at one level. And it kind of stops at that point, and that's the ceiling point. Okay, so we have the Fruity Limiter acting as a limit, literally. So let's open up the Parametric EQ2. This sound is a little buzzy, so that's why we added a low pass filter. So you just grab that point, left click and drag to a low pass shape, pull this down. So it's a little low pass, just to get rid of some of the high frequency stuff. Now this has an automation envelope tied to it. So we're gonna activate that. So let's add something funky. Let's add a fruity chorus effect, again, to give it that weird alien kind of beachside sound. It's a little too much chorus, we can pull it down. About 50-50. Let's go back to the EQ and let's pull up some subtones. Like around 80 hertz. Now that sub is really picking up the bass. Okay, so let's hear the synth now. So you can see how everything, we're just moving through the audio top to bottom. It's very simple. So this is clearly too loud, so let's pull the synth down. Now notice we haven't panned anything yet until we should pan the guitar to spread that out. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, but the synth, we want to turn it down first. Now you see now we're mixing in context. We're not just mixing a sound by itself. You can do it on and off, but it's a macro view. You could zoom into the micro view. You could zoom back out. Okay, you want to zoom in and out every now and then. In this case, we're going to zoom out for a second. We're going to pan this synth to the left about 30-something%. Actually, let's pan it to the right because again, that hi-hat sounds like it's on the left. So that we're balancing sound. So we want to have something on the right side. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, the synth sounds good volume-wise and it sounds good panned, but what can we add to it to make it sound more dynamic? This is where you would solo the sound. So right-click, and this is where you start to add your effects like Fruity Delay. We're going to add a subtle delay. Where's Fruity Delay at? Here we go. We're going to put it on ping pong mode just like the guitars. Turn the input down a little bit, lower feedback, and change the time to maybe 4 instead of 2. So it's very subtle and you can barely hear it. And that's the point. The subtle things add up to the bigger picture. So Fruity Reverb 2, we're going to add that to give it a little more space or depth in the sound. We're going to turn the decay actually lower, but we're going to have the wet level high. It gives us that dance effect. And we have to increase the size a little bit and increase the high cut. You can even add a pre-delay. So it's a little swing to it. Okay, so now we can hear it in context. Now this sound sounds good, but let's say you want to saturate it a little more. You want to make it more edgy. So let's move those plugins down. Let's go to slot 1. We're going to add a Fruity Wave Shaper. We're going to turn the post level down because this can get pretty loud. All we're going to do is left click and drag this up. Now we're going to right click a point in here, and it makes it sound distorted a little bit. This is called Sine Shaper Distortion or Sine Shaper Saturation. So now we have like a pseudo distorted synth, and it sounds completely different if I take the effects off. It just sounds like it's in your face, but when I put the effects on, it sounds a little further back and it sounds a little more angry and edgy. So now you can see how mixing can literally transform a sound. Not only can it mesh things together, it transforms things. So let's move on to the brass and how that's going to fit in the mix. Let's first turn the brass down. It's very loud. Now the brass has all the characteristics I want. It has that bite and it sticks through the mix, and that's all we need. Now with somebody who's new at mixing, they probably add an EQ, a compressor, reverb, stuff they don't have to add. If it sounds good, it sounds good. You don't need to touch it. What I might do is give it a little space. So we're gonna open up a Fruity Reverb 2 and give it a little space. Now remember, when you put plugins directly on things, it takes away from the original signal. When you put a reverb on it. Very subtle reverb, you can barely hear it. Let's turn the decay time up. Now you can hear that tail. Okay, very subtle, but that tonality of the reverb adds more dimension to the song. Again, very subtle things make your song sound a lot better. I'm gonna pan the brass a little to the left. Even smaller, like 10%. So let's get into the organ coming in. And the last thing we have to do is worry about the synth and the guitar part. So the organ, again, loud because we recorded at high levels. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, this is a little more complex as far as where to pan this sound. So it's obvious we need to turn it down. But now the question is, where do we pan it? Here's where you need to listen to your stereo separation. You need to ask yourself, where's the balance of the song? Is the song pulling my right ear? Is it giving my right ear more attention, or is it giving my left ear more attention? Where are the sounds generally panned, okay? And then you want to counterbalance the panning of the song. So let's turn off the organ. I'm going to close my eyes, put my head down and listen to where things are panned, and then I'm going to decide which side the organ's going to go on. I just realized. Okay, so hold on. So basically what I hear is the synth in my right ear. So that tells me I should probably pan the organ to the left to counterbalance that synth. Now again, in this video, I'm mixing over a monitor system. I can clearly tell the stereo separation field. Whereas if you're mixing over headphones, you can't really determine, the stereo field. You need monitors. It's just one of those things where to understand that level of mixing, you need a set of monitors. And we have a subwoofer active, so we hear a lot of bass frequencies that a lot of people don't hear. Now, what I do generally is after I'm done mixing on my monitors, I go back to the headphones and then I clear up some things that may not translate properly. So in this case, the song may sound flat because the bass that I hear, you can't hear. So my goal from when I put my headphones on is to make the bass hearable, okay? And that's a whole nother process. But the point is, you want to have that stereo field to judge your panning positions. So in this case, I like the organ sticking out a little bit more than the synth. So I'm going to pull the organ up a little higher than the synth. So we're going to push the synth to the background so it's not the forefront instrument. let's go on to the next section where there's a synth. So the synth's a little bit loud. I'm gonna pull it down. And I have to decide, is it a supportive element or is it the element that needs to stick out? In this case, it's more supportive. I'm gonna pull the volume down and I might even pan it. In this case, I already have the counterbalance of the organ to the left and I have the synth on the right. To balance these, I would need something in the middle. So I'm gonna keep that synth in the middle, okay? So that's a very subtle synth, but it adds all the character to the song. Now here's where all the guitars add up. So here's where I'm gonna have to turn down the new guitar inputs, guitar 1 in this case. I'm gonna turn that down. Now remember, this guitar was not added into the guitar group or the guitar bus. So what I can do is just get the level right. I just wanted to stick out a little bit. So once it's set, then we're gonna right click the guitar bus down here, route to this track only, boom. Now that guitar is added to the guitar group or the guitar bus, and now it has the same effect. So now let's hear it. So I'm gonna solo all the guitars, and now I'm gonna start making decisions on where to pan guitars because I didn't pan anything. And panning is not just to pan, you know, panning is to make everything stand out a little bit more. So if things aren't standing out in particular, that's when you want to go panning. Now in this case, I'm going to pan the high frequencies more to the right, low frequencies more to the left. Why? That's because people are used to, when they hear a piano, they hear the low frequencies on the left, high frequencies on the right because of the way it's mic'd. Okay, when you have a stereo mic'd piano, you generally hear the bass or the lower tones on the left, higher tones on the right based on how it's mic'd. So people are just used to that, and that's what we're going to do with the guitar. So let's figure out which one has low notes. So this one's probably the lowest. This is actually the lowest, so we're going to pan that to the left about 50% or so to really give it some stereo, to give it separation from the rest of the guitar. So this guitar is kind of in the middle. We're going to leave it up the middle, literally. And this guitar, high frequencies, we're going to pan it 50% to the right. Now you don't have to pan it that extreme, but let's hear it all together. Now remember, this is another tone. So we have kind of, it's in the middle. It's not highest, it's not the lowest. So we have to decide where this is going to go. So in that case, it's a battle between the two ones in the middle. So we have to decide which one has a higher pitch. This one on the right has a higher pitch than this one on the left. So we're going to pan that a little to the left, maybe 10% to the left, or the right, excuse me. And we're going to pan the one with the lower tone 10% to the left. So even though they were in the middle, we're going to slightly pan those two separate and, you know, pan the extremes even further. And that way we can really have everything panned to its own position so that it stands out in that guitar track. So that's how you deal with multiple tracks, like a vocal, background vocal, or a guitar, or anything that takes multiple takes and you stack them. That's how you want to decide on your panning, okay? Let's hear it all in context, okay? A mix is not anything without context because a mix is mixing things together. So I'm going to turn the guitar bus a little bit down a little bit more because I want the organ to stick out. I want the organ to stick out and I don't want to compromise the drums, the power in the drums. So what I'm going to do is lower these relatively. So I'm going to lower the organ and lower the guitars. So where my organ's a little bit louder, but both of them are lower than the drums. Because what we have in mixing is called dynamic range. There's a lot of movement and a lot of things are trying to catch your attention. The guitars are moving up and down. The organ has its own swing. The drums has its own swing. With all of that stuff having its own kind of rhythm and groove, it takes away from the groove of the drums. So you want to give as much attention to your drums as possible. Now, what I go over in how to mix beats easily is how to add compression and do different things to take away from the dynamic range. But for now, we're just going to lower the fader to take away the attention. going to show you a little cheat sheet, because if you get Fleek, you get the presets. Like we said, you get the FL Studio 12 mixer presets. So you literally don't have to do anything. All you have to do is right click, go to File, Open Mixer Track State, go to your Fleek folder, which is on the desktop in this case. And where are we at here? We're going to go to Presets, FL Studio Mixer, and you can go to Mastering Preset 1 or 2. We have 2 different options for you. And I'm not even going to show people on YouTube the settings because it would be unfair to the people with Fleek. So there you have a shortcut to your master, okay? So let's hit play, and now let's hear it mastered. So you might want to turn your headphones down or whatever you're listening to down, because it's going to be significantly louder. So we have to ask ourselves, even with the mastering plugins, okay, we have to maintain that balance. So, you know, you might want to turn things up even after you do the mastering. So you see there, I had to adjust the guitar because the guitar wasn't standing out, and that was a moving element that needed to have attention at that point. So I had to lift that fader so that it had a little bit more attention. And I lifted up the guitar bus as well. So hopefully you took away a lot of tips, a lot of, the mixing decisions and the reasoning behind it. Okay, mixing is very complex, but we simplify it for you and how to mix beats easily. And we go over all this stuff. We make it so simple that you won't get confused on what a bus is. You won't get confused on the processing from top to bottom of the plugins. You won't be confused on compression, things like EQ, things like a limiter, reverb, and the different ways you can use reverb. You won't be confused on auxiliary sends. You won't be confused on all the stuff like panning, stereo separation, faders, EQ, automation. We go over all that and how to mix beats easily. There's a lot packed into that course, and you even get free access for 30 days into the advanced mixing course, which goes over even higher levels of mixing at busyworksbeats.com. So you really need to take advantage, because if I didn't take advantage back when I was trying to learn mixing and I didn't take that step, I would have never understood the difference between how my song could sound versus how it sounded. I used to always think that I didn't need to learn mixing, but mixing will take you to higher levels of music production. I'm talking about in the sound design levels. I'm talking about making a song sound good. I'm talking about working with bigger artists because they trust you with the mix. We're talking about, there's a lot of things you can do with mixing. Your perception in music production will change when you understand mixing. You're going to see the future before you even get there. It's going to help you reach your goal when you understand mixing. So click that link below and act now, because if I didn't act back in the day, I would have never understood the stuff. So if you want to understand mixing and you want to be an expert at it, this literally will turn you into a professional on this course. So if you want to be a professional in mixing and you want your songs to sound radio ready, click that link below and it'll take you to how to mix beats easily at busyworksbeats.com. So thanks for watching today. It's busyworksbeats.com.